Hi everyone, I'm Haley Preston. In this video, I wanted to explain a little bit about some of these new transhuman abilities we've discovered since unlocking the Nexus, or the Nex for short. Every human, and even a few robots who've linked to the Nex like me, can detach what's called their X-Ghost from their physical body. Normally, everyone's X-Ghost is integrated within their body. This is called being capped. When you detach your X-Ghost, it appears right next to you, as long as there's room for it, and this is called being ghosted. Your X-Ghost is semi-corporeal, so even though it's called a ghost and you can kinda see through it, it actually can't fly or walk through walls or anything because it still has a physical presence. Once your X-Ghost detaches, your physical body falls unconscious and becomes what's called a sleeper. And then your detached X-Ghost can wander around freely and do stuff. Just remember to leave your sleeper in a safe place, because people could come along and play practical jokes on you. What you look like in ghosted form is called your Nex avatar. And though most people look exactly the same as they do physically, some trans people appear as a different gender. And even some robots appear more human. It all depends on who you really are inside. Ghosted people are more protected from physical hazards. They can still be injured by things like heat, radiation, and baseballs, but because they're semi-corporeal, they have a little more resistance. It's also harder for ghosted people to do physical things in the real world because they're all slippery and only half there. And, of course, if you're human, your physical body still has to eat and exercise and stuff. And for whatever reason, even a linked robot like me has to sleep. And you can't actually get the benefits of sleep unless you're capped. So if you're ghosted for too long, you start to get really sleepy. Finally, when you're all done wandering around as a detached X-Ghost, you can always snap back to your sleeper at any time. It doesn't matter how far away you are, or even if there's anything blocking the way. You just disappear and then reappear capped within your body again. Snapping back also happens automatically if you can't stay awake anymore, or if somehow you get really hurt and fall unconscious, but that's the subject of another video. Both these abilities, ghost detachment and snapping back, are things that almost every single human and linked robot in human space can do. Pretty neat, huh? But things get really interesting if you're lucky enough to become X-bonded to somebody else. But we'll cover that in a different video too. Anyway, those are the basics of X-Ghosts. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.
Good evening and welcome to Savage Universe. I am J-M, and I have with me the great pleasure of having Tracy Sizemore here of the Han Cluster. Tracy, good to get to sit down with you. I'm so excited. I mean, this is the third time I think I've had you on to talk about the Han Cluster.
Yes.
Welcome back.
I feel very privileged and very I feel like I'm taking advantage, but I love being on the show, so I bug you every now and then, and I love talking about Han Cluster, and it's hard for me to do it like just on my own. So it's great to be here to be able to talk about it.
Well, I think this time, though, it was me because I'm about to start a blind play test for you of the Plot Point campaign. And I was like, hey, we should have you on to talk about this because I'm very excited about this. My players had their session 0 last Friday, tomorrow night. We are starting into the Han Cluster, which I assume means that we are just ever creeping closer toward
the big day.
The big day.
So the current plan, and I've made this public, is to crowdfund on beginning on March 4th. It's going to be on BackerKit. And
Awesome.
There are numerous ways to find us there. The most obvious one is hancluster.com, which is my website, which has a whole bunch of history about the Han Cluster to get you immersed. It will also have these videos. So I'm going to have 4 of these Life in the Han Cluster videos when I'm done. 2 of them are already finished. We're going to be able to show the second one here later.
I'm so excited that we get to preview these.
And I think they're really cool because they help explain to the players the most important iconic things about what makes the Han cluster different. And I'm excited to have gotten a really awesome voice actress to play Haley, who is an NPC in the plot point campaign. She's very important, and just to be able to share those things and to have a GM, it's a tool for the GM to say, here players, here's a really concise explanation of some of the most important things, and then they can refer to them whenever they want, right? So that'll be on the website, it'll be on YouTube, it'll also be on the crowdfunding page, so I can show those off. And yeah, so March 4th, hancluster.com, March 4th. We've also got a Discord server and stuff like that. So
I've got the backer kit link up there right now. Go check that out. Here's the link to the website. And then if you want even more Han Cluster goodness, here is the link to the Discord server. And everybody, you are echoing what I said when I got to see these. I got to see these probably about a month ago. The videos
before you had voice actors on them, right? You had them with my voice, right?
I think the first two. I think you had the first one with the voice actors.
Lisa is her name.
Yeah, with Lisa, and then the rest were with your voice. And these are great. I think this is a great way to highlight what's really important and unique about the Han cluster.
Yeah,
and we're going to show off the other one at the end.
Yeah, so the second one, and then there's 3 and 4, which so the second one is X bonding, which is super important because all the PCs in the Han clusters are X bonded together. And then the next one is Draxels and Draxel communication and X gear, which are really iconic things that may not seem important, but they are. And then the last one is wounds and healing, because what happens when your X Ghost takes damage? And I've got a video that explains that.
That's awesome. Well, you also have some new GM tools, and I figured we'd show off some of that and some of the new art, if you're okay with that.
Sure.
This is Billy Berserker, me too. Billy is looking forward to Han Cluster merch.
Yeah, one day I think the plan, I think eventually I'll have a shirt, a t-shirt kind of thing. I'll probably gonna do it via Redbubble. At least that's my current plan. Which is, it's not ideal, but at least it's out there, right? At least it'll have some options with Han Cluster art that's made specifically for t-shirts. So that's the plan. And then maybe some other stuff, but I'm not sure I'm not quite sure about merch yet. So we'll see how well it does and then go from there.
I mean, that is the nice thing about Redbubble. You can put it up there.
Yep.
And if something takes off, then you can look at a different way of producing it.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's very low risk.
It's low risk.
That's right.
And at this point, I'll take some low risk, because if we get into the crowdfunding thing, I'll talk about high risk and what my call to action for everybody listening to the stream is.
Well, let's start there. Let's start with the call to action. And I mean, you are going for kind of the ace dream. You're going for
an offset print run.
Yeah.
So I want to do the book, and right now it's one book, and then I want to do cards, and I want to do the same exact size cards as the Pinnacle cards are. So the archetype cards, the recent cards from the 20th anniversary Suede edition.
Yeah.
Because my whole plan here is to be able to give you cards for the Han cluster that you can stick in your player boxes that you got at the 20th anniversary. So edge cards, power cards, vehicle cards, including starships, stuff like that. Status cards for whether you're capped or ghosted, with explanations for what those mean, right? So that you can have it at your table, give it to your players and say, you are ghosted. This is what that means. These are the mechanical things, the effects of being ghosted versus being capped, right? And then campaign cards for the GM to distribute when you hit certain milestones in the plot point campaign. Like you get a certain thing, they give you a campaign card, and now you've got it. You stick it in your player's box. We have this important thing from the plot point campaign. And then finally, one of my favorite things is the shift intensity cards, which we're going to show off a little bit, because the Han cluster, one of the big things that's happening, and one of the threat that's happening in the Han cluster, is there is a miasma going around of people starting to change their behaviors. Like they're starting to get more paranoid, more angry, more frustrated, all that stuff. And there's no real good explanation for it, except that everybody's next auras are starting to shift in color. So usually they're blue, right? That's what everybody has seen so far. But now they're starting to shift toward a yellow color. So just ever so slightly, you start to see a green-blue happening, right? And there's mechanics in the game, a lot like fear levels, but not the same. Fear levels from Deadlands, where every level up in shift intensity, this effect increases more and more, to the point where if it gets to the maximum shift intensity, really bad things are happening. And once you get to level 3 of shift intensity, you're starting to get into taking negatives for every persuasion, taunt, and intimidation roll that you make with people who are not immune to the yellow shift. And by immune, I mean they remain blue. They're all the way blue. Right?
All the way blue.
The PCs in the Han cluster are all the way blue. They are immune to this effect. They don't exactly know what it is or why it is yet, but part of the exploration of the plot point campaign is to understand what it is, figure out how to stop it for good, and execute the plan, right?
Yeah.
But until then, if you don't want to play the plot point campaign, the yellow shift is out there, it's affecting people, and you are tasked with sort of dealing with the fallout of those effects, helping people, dealing with problems, all that other stuff, to kind of keep people together and keep the shift intensity down, those moments of connection that help that.
Well, and I mean, one, if you don't want to play the plot point campaign, I mean, that is an option, but also you're going to give a ton of Savage Tales.
Yes, I'll have several Savage Tales. I think right now I'm looking at 8 or 9 of them, so there's not going to be a ton of them, partly because I'm really out of room. I don't want to make this book any bigger than it is right now, but also partly because, the Savage Tales are important to me, and I want to make sure they're good, and I want to crowdfund sometime. So I don't want to just endlessly, keep having to create new content for no reason, right? The book is already very, very good as it stands, I think, and I just want to make sure that you have some good, solid Savage Tales, really well written, good ones.
Having read the book, I can say that it's incredible. It's everything that you guys think it's going to be and more. And I'd like to pause for a second and kind of go back to one of the things that you said, because I too drew the correlation between fear levels and the shift intensity. And that's one of my favorite parts of Deadlands, not just the fear levels, but that the players have an active role in reducing that as they go about and engaging with kind of the core activity of Deadlands, is the Twilight Legion, right? And you tell stories and you lower it. But I love what you've done with shift intensity, because again, I mean, when I first had you on, you kind of pitched this as sort of Firefly meets Ted Lasso. And the idea that the core activity of the plot point campaign is fighting against this sort of global paranoia that is setting and like tearing everyone apart. And the core activity is finding a way to remind people, hey, we're all in this together. We're all part of the same community. It doesn't matter what we look like, or what, whether you're an awakened synth or what you are. You have value in the collective and as individuals, and that's what the group's fighting for in the plot point campaign. And that just speaks. I'm not going to say it's a timely message, but I think it might be an evergreen message.
Right. I think so too. I think it's both, because this has been in development for 10 years, right? So 10 years ago, we had a completely different world. right? And now it really does feel timely, even though that was always my intention from the beginning. And as it's developed, and part of what I'm really excited about is that every aspect of the setting, every aspect of the plot point campaign, which is sort of the heart of the setting, and every aspect of all the rules, setting rules, and all the things that are happening and all the things that you engage with point toward that idea of community connection, meaning we're trying to create community connection in order to lessen and sort of slow down this effect. The only way to stop it completely is to play through the plot point campaign. But if you want to lessen it and stave it off, you need to help people, yes. You need to solve problems, yes. Maybe deal with bad influences and bad actors, yes. But in addition to that, it's not like tale telling in Deadlands.
Yeah, no, not at all. Yeah,
it's a moment of community connection, like making people feel hope, making people feel like they're working together for a larger purpose, or being or life is worth living in some way. And I try to mechanicize that in the adventures that I write for it.
Yeah, which is great game design. If this is the core activity that you want the setting and the campaign to be about and the players to engage with, you need to have some sort of mechanical way for them to do that, because we're playing a game, and I love that it's not something. It was so important to you that you spent time designing good rules around it, so that it wasn't just sort of, oh yeah, this is important, sort of kind of a hand wavy sort of thing.
Right. And when you go into the secret part of it, and part of the Han cluster is about discovery, right? And that's partly why I hesitate to go too deeply into what happens, because part of the fun of it, I think, is discovering how not only what the shift intensity is, or what the yellow shift is, and maybe what's causing it and all that, but also how humanity over the last 300 years have in their own way contributed to the solution of the yellow shift before the PCs even arrive.
There are these watershed moments that are seemingly unrelated, but they were all keyed in by individuals who have the same desire to like solve problems and inspire hope, that the PCs, if they're clever, and if you play through the plot point campaign, you can use these peaks to sort of like thread a needle and kind of close this loop, which I don't want to give any more away. So we're going to pause. Let's talk about the challenge and the high risk of the of the crowdfunding campaign.
So my plan, my hope, my dream, right? And this is a big dream, and I know that. And I'm taking a big risk already to realize this dream. Is I want to do an offset print run, which means, for people who don't know what that means, I want to send my stuff to China, get a lot of books printed, and then have them sent back just like Pinnacle does, and be able to sell books in that way. I don't want to do a print on demand. I think print on demand is useful. I think it's great for certain things. I don't want to do it because I think it's a little bit too expensive for consumers, and I think it's very hard for producers to make money doing it. Right? So if I can get the numbers, and this is the call to action part, if I can get enough numbers to justify a print run, number one, the quality of the books will be better.
They will be.
They'll be a lot better than print on demand will. And number two, I'll be able to do the cards and the book, and hopefully create a sustainable enough model for myself that I'll be able to continue producing Han Cluster as we go forward, right? And that means, it's really best if I can get followers ahead of time on the backer kit page, because that tells me where I am in terms of what I can expect the crowdfunding campaign to do, when I actually launch. Now, I know I've got some built-in support, like with the Savage Worlds community, with people who are going to help me. I'm also working angles on different podcasts that I'll be doing later as we go, and just being able to come on here helps me. But if you can spread the word, if you're excited about Han Cluster, like, and if you're not, I get it. That's okay. Maybe not for you. It's not for everybody, for sure.
Right.
But if you're excited about it, please let people know. Guide them to the website, tell them about it a little bit, and to the Jumpstart, which is on Drive-Thru RPG right now. And I'm very proud of that Jumpstart. It's very good, I think.
Yeah.
It's a very iconic adventure for the Han Cluster. It shows you what you're going to be doing, and then try it and read it and see what you think of it, and spread the word.
Awesome. Well, let's look at these new these are the shift intensity cards.
Yes. So there's 6 levels of shift intensity, much like fear levels, right? And at level 0, well, there's really like 7, I suppose, because at level 0, that just means the yellow shift does not exist. It's not out there at all, right? And at level 6, it's the worst it can possibly be. You don't ever want it to get to level 6 for multiple reasons, and I don't want to spoil too much, but ultimately imagine that as the yellow shift gets more intense and the shift intensity increases, people's reactions to it, people's sort of the effect on the people of human space, of all the people on human space, except for those few that are immune, get worse and worse, more frustrated, more angry, more paranoid, more, all those feelings. Imagine the worst possible level of that. That's shift intensity 6.
Yeah.
You never want to get there, right? And part of the cards are for the GM to be able to stick them, at the front of their GM screen or whatever, and say, right now in this particular location, in this community or whatever, you are at shift intensity 3 or 4. And as the shift intensity cards go up, you'll see that the color of your next auras change, right? So 3, it was a little bit more blue-green than 4.
Yeah.
4, it's a little more, or 5, a little more yellow than 4 was, and 6 is just completely all the way yellow.
Yeah.
And it really gives you it gives you an explanation of what
Yeah.
exactly is happening at shift intensity 6 on the card. It's not good.
No, not at all. Well, and then you got the status card.
Yes.
Plans for that, which is I love the back of that, and I love that you got a next ghost right there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the status cards, there's only 2 of them. But it adds it works in tandem with the pinnacle status cards, right? But these are more long-term and player choice, right? So it's not a thing that happens when you get hit or whatever, like distracted or bound or whatever. It's an easy way for the GM to hand out to players, you are currently ghosted, meaning that you have detached your ex-ghost from your body, your sleeper is somewhere, and this is what it means when you're ghosted. This is what it looks like when you're ghosted, right? And so you'll take a -2 interaction penalty for any purely physical things that you want to do as an ex-ghost, because you're semi-corporeal and kind of slippery.
Yeah.
And then next-based weapons and hazards affect you normally, but purely physical, ghostless weapons like slug throwers and stuff that don't have any kind of next component at all, they'll be -2 to hit you and do -4 damage to you. Right? And it goes the opposite direction too. So any next-based weapon against a purely physical target with no next component, that means any animal like a bear or any other piece of equipment or object.
A physical barrier or something like that.
Exactly. -2 to hit, -4 to damage. And then if you're capped in the middle, if your ghost is within your body, then you're subject to normal damage from all sources, because your ghost is there and your physical body is there too.
Well, and that's one of the things I like about the way you're handling being ghosted is it seemed to me that the design goal was to allow the group to spread out as far as they need to do as wildly epic things as they want.
Yes.
And not just be like, well, Tracy, welcome to my part of the adventure. You can see and you can talk to me, but you can't affect anything, and nothing can affect you. It's not a Jiminy Cricket thing. It's I'm here. I may not be as 100% effective all the time as I would be if I was physically here with you, but I'm still here.
But I can be really effective. I can be super effective. Like it's just enough of a penalty to make to make you feel it and to feel it mechanically.
Yeah.
Right.
And then we've got
so Haley Preston.
Mm-hmm.
So she's a sort of central character in the Plot Point campaign, and a central character in the history of the Han cluster. In fact, she was the first ever individual ghosted machine. Or a linked machine, a machine that linked to the next, right? And she did it in 2584. It's right here on her T-shirt. And Live Robot Walking, that graphic came from Dot Moore, one of my good friends. She created that graphic for me. We collaborated to come up with the slogan. And I think it's awesome because the established in 2584 is the year that she linked to the next, and she was the first ever to do it. And she's a Z-Kid, which is a robot that basically looks like 12 to 13 years old, and there was a reason they were created. And her story of how she linked to the next and what happened there, she gives it within the Plot Point campaign. Mm-hmm. It's one of the sort of watershed moments of the campaign where she tells you that story. It's a heartbreaking story, but it also sort of indicates how resilient and wise she has become in the 70 years since she's linked. So she still looks 12 years old. She still looks like a child robot, but she still has those childlike mannerisms because that's how she was built. But she's actually very wise and 70 years old and has been around the block and has done some pretty amazing things. And it's all in the game. She's not meant to take over for the player. She doesn't do that. That's not her thing. Her thing is as a facilitator, as somebody who's got a vision. And so she sort of works as a quest giver in some ways, but also she's actually useful to the players in other ways. And it's the kind of thing I don't want to spoil, but at some point later in the Plot Point campaign, you're going to have the opportunity to play some of the people that you've met during the Plot Point campaign, just briefly. Awesome. And it's really cool because you're able to then sort of affect their own stories and guide what they do and how they contribute to solving the yellow shift.
That's awesome. All right, well, we got 2 more pieces of art to show off.
Oh, yes.
Yes, this is gorgeous.
It is. It's so good. So this is called Leap of Faith. I won't tell you why, but it is set up on the planet of Shock, which is basically a super poisonous planet. In all respects, really dangerous, the most dangerous planet that humans must interact with in the Han cluster because it has, it's basically sort of the Arrakis of the Han cluster. It holds all the Christum that you need for hyperdrive, right? And it's inhabited by a colony of machines called the Shock, of the same name of the planet, who actually mine that Christum. And this is ostensibly a part of the Plot Point campaign where the PCs in their ship are on their way into this maelstrom of activity, but I don't want to say any more.
That's awesome. I mean, it's a gorgeous piece.
It is. It's a great piece. Great piece. Okay, so this is repairing the Christum drive. This is also part of the Plot Point campaign. And early on, you're sort of hit with a distress call from one of a famous sort of trade ship that's the only one to consistently make trade runs between Earth and the Han cluster because it's like 2,000 light years away, right? So it takes a long time to get there, like 18 months normally. So this is a big ship called the Rassiter, and you're tasked with sort of helping them in their distress. And this is the big, ultimate moment of that particular plot point. And basically it's just a big dramatic task, and it's hugely high stakes, and it's pretty cool.
That's awesome. Now, I don't know that I've ever heard this story. You may have shared it in other places, but for people who don't know, you said you've been working on this for 10 years.
Yeah.
What was the germ of inspiration that started the Han cluster?
It's hard to say. I think I do remember that I do remember the super early days when
Yeah.
I was writing a couple of paragraphs about, okay, well, what happens in 300 years after the planet Earth has when we've sort of consumed ourselves to death? Like, let's just assume that kind of happens, right? We get to the Earth to the brink of ecological disaster, and in the process, we discover hyperdrive, right? We discover a way to branch out among the stars, and we find a cluster of planets that are relatively close by. And how does humanity start over, or how does humanity expand from there?
Yeah.
Eventually, of course, the Earth sort of reclaims itself. It does do that, but it takes a while to do that. But I think the germ of it is that I'm very much a Enneagram 9 type person, which is I'm a connector, you know,
Yeah.
I'm a
I'm
harmonizer.
a one wing 9, so I
Awesome,
can.
awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, a harmonizer, and I like to do that, and so I'm always I think the germ started when I was in high school, because I had a fantasy setting that I had started to run that has very similar things, elements that ended up finally making it into the Hun cluster. And one of those things is that idea of community connection, that idea that we're all in some way underneath it all. There's a collective consciousness, and there's something that binds us all together, right? And I took that germ of an idea from high school, which I ran a couple of sessions of. It was pretty cool. And then moved it to sci-fi because I felt like it felt better that way.
Yeah.
And then I just sort of iterated and
Yeah.
iterated again and again and again and more and more and more, and collaborated with my friend Daryl, who contributed immensely to some of the ideas that made that that ended up making part of the Han cluster, right? Including the Nex itself, and how X bonding came about and stuff like that. So it was sort of like me telling him what I thought, and him trying to give me some mechanical ideas and see what stuck, and some stuff stuck. And then I was like, oh, and you're sort of
Yeah.
like, your mind is blown, because like that's an amazing idea, and all of a sudden I can integrate mechanics with ideals,
Yeah.
theme, right? And do this. And it's a little bit unlike other RPGs in many respects, because you're starting off in a world that's pretty optimistic. And what I have a little sidebar in the book that says, like, some people will be really obsessed with trying to create a character that can engage with what you're going to do in the setting, right?
Yeah.
We know what you're going to do, but my encouragement is to create a character that you want to inhabit the world, trusting that the skills you give them will be applicable to the problems you encounter, right? And that's how I've written the campaign.
That's awesome.
So yeah, it was a long journey, and I think that if I tried to release it 5 years ago, it would be a shadow of what it is now.
Yeah. No, you can tell the love and care that has been put into the setting and the plot point campaign. Now, because I want to be a big booster for Han Cluster, just know that as we get close to March, we're going to have you on again.
Yes.
Like the week leading up to it, or even the day, if we can do it like the Thursday of that first week, we will make sure that we shout it from the rooftops.
I would appreciate it.
that it has gone live. And I'd love to have you on my channel to talk about the Han Cluster at some point right around that time too, to kind of
boost the signal.
The icon. Yeah, I want to boost the signal. Can't stop the signal now.
I think right now, and don't hold me to this, but the plan currently also is that I'll be going on the Gnomecast podcast to talk about it. So that's the plan currently. I don't want to guarantee anything, but because I don't have any control over it, but that's what they're saying that they're going to do, which is pretty cool.
Awesome. Well, this was my super clever, sneaky way of segueing into, well, you've started a new podcast called Designing Problems. Here's the link for that. Tell us about Designing Problems.
So Designing Problems, I love talking design, right?
Yeah.
I may not know what the heck I'm talking about. I'm really kind of, I feel myself in the imposter syndrome just like everybody else does.
Yeah.
I feel the vulnerability of putting something out there, not only that you really care about, that you want to share with others, but then putting money into it,
Yeah.
actually putting your money where your mouth is and taking that risk and doing production and going through all the trials and tribulations of trying to put something out there. It is very daunting. But I wanted to create a podcast where we wanted to encourage people. We wanted to give people information. If you have the information, you're better off, right? The
Mm-hmm.
more you know, the less scary things are.
Wow.
Right? And
Yeah.
so Christian Serrano and I collaborated, and I sort of browbeat him at Gamehole Con and said, "Hey, I need a partner for this, and you're awesome. So will you please, please, please do this with me?" And then he gave me that smile, that look like that I want to do it, but I'm not sure I can. I'm not sure I have the time. And I just pounced on his weakness and said no, and said we're doing this. And so I put it all together for him. I'm trying to make sure that he only has to do uh, just basically to show up and be a sort of brain trust with me on it. I do all the editing, I do all the other stuff because that's easy for me, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, the whole point is I wanted to create a space for designers and potential licensees. It's not necessarily strictly a Savage Worlds podcast, but I do Savage Worlds. Christian does
Yeah.
Savage Worlds. We're going to talk Savage Worlds. That's
Yeah.
going to be the way it
100%.
is. But that whole process from getting motivated to do it, to finding your inspiration, to writing the iconic adventure for your setting, to figuring out what the PCs do, to trying to start, okay, what do I have to do to produce this and put it out there?
Yeah.
What do I have to do to get it laid out into some sort of cohesive document? What do I have to do to crowdfund it? What do I have to
Mm-hmm.
do to deal with art, right?
Yeah.
All these things are incredibly daunting steps as you sort of level up in your design expertise and your willingness to go further and take more risks, right? I've done plenty of stuff. I've done production for Holler. I've done development for Pine Box Middle School. I've written a bunch of adventures for Pinnacle. I'm doing Han Cluster, right?
Yeah.
But I still have a lot to learn myself. And
Oh,
I
yeah.
think part of this podcast is to sort of connect together with people who are just as nervous and worried about this as we are, uh, with maybe giving you a little bit more information than you already know, right? So that's what the podcast is about, is exploring these topics in an encouraging and productive way, rather than saying gatekeeping. I don't want to gatekeep anybody. I want to
No, that's
encourage
awesome.
everybody.
That's awesome. So here's the link to the podcast, and then you also have a Discord channel set up for that.
Yes, yes, and
And
it's pretty active. It was active like boom, boom, boom. First episode, it was pretty crazy. We have
that's
some
fantastic.
pretty animated discussions that I'm again. We're very all about trying to keep it positive and encouraging. But to give you good, solid information. We're not sugarcoating anything. We're telling you
Yeah.
the truth, right?
Well, and that's the thing. People always ask me, how do you start writing? How do you get something published? How do you, get in with a company? And it's like,
Yeah,
it's a lot of work,
it is.
right?
It's,
And
it's
it's
scary.
it's not a industry where you can say, well, I went to school for it, and like here it is on my resume, and I know what I'm doing. Like we all sort of, it's still very much a cottage industry where we're all kind of learning as we go.
Yeah, and we say this in the podcast. Like, look, even veterans of the industry still don't know quite what they're doing. They
Yeah.
still have to wrestle with these problems that we're talking about right now. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're Wizards of the Coast, Chaosium, or Shane Hensley. We all struggle with it. I've
Yeah.
seen it firsthand.
Yeah. Well, Tracy, it is always a joy to talk with you about the Han cluster. This is the setting I am most excited about coming out, and like I said, I'm going to have you on my channel. We're going to have you back on Savage Universe. We're going to shout it from the rooftops.
Yeah, I would appreciate it.
Because I want this to be successful for you, very selfishly, because I want to hold it in my hands and play it at the table.
Same.
With a gorgeous offset print book.
Yeah, me too. I mean, you know, my wife, Boof, and I'm lucky. I have a partner who really 100% supports me, and a lot of people can't do what I'm doing, right?
Yeah.
Totally understand that. I totally understand it, and I'm taking a huge risk doing it.
Yeah.
With all the art I've ordered, with the sheer size of the book at this point. That book is about 400 pages. I'm trying to keep it to 400 pages and no more. And this is not because it's a whole bunch of fluff with nothing there. I really strongly believe that 400 pages needs to be there. And a lot of it is the plot point campaign. And the reason it's so big is because it's unusual. And I want to give you everything you need as a GM to understand what you need to do.
Yeah.
And what this plot point campaign is trying to do, because there's more to it than just show up and fight some bad people.
Oh yeah, yeah, Grom. You and I were on the same page. We're on the same page about how we feel about the Han cluster. Well, Tracy, any final thoughts before we wrap up, and then we'll do our outro with part two of the Life in the Han Cluster.
Life in the Han Cluster with Haley Preston. Final thoughts really is, if again, spread the word. You know, it's not about making money for me. It really isn't. Boof and I have decided that if I don't make money on this, at least I'll have the book in my hands, and that will be success for us. But what it is about for me is spreading this to people who might actually want to play it. Who might actually want to engage with it as a game, right? I don't want it to just sit on a shelf. I want you to be inspired, right? Even if you just read it, and I think it's a good read, but I think it's an even better game. And so that's my hope is that people will play it, not just buy it. You know what I mean? Although buying it helps, because it will actually help me to give Han Cluster legs and keep working on it with new things. I have ideas, lots of ideas, and there's lots I could do. But if I don't have an audience, there's no reason to do it.
Right. Well, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. We've got something hopefully special for next week. We will not be streaming on Thanksgiving, but I think we're going to try and get some videos from Aces and swag members and do a Thanksgiving little video stream at some point next week. We'll see how that all comes together. And then we'll be back in December. On December 5th, I have Rudy coming on to talk about some new products as well. So until next time, go out there and play some Savage Worlds, and may all your dice ace.
Hi everyone, I'm Haley Preston. In this video, I'm going to explore an amazing ability that only a few select people in human space have been lucky enough to experience. It's called X-bonding. In a previous video, I described the transhuman abilities associated with X-ghosts. Everyone has one, and all those who are linked to the Nex can detach their X-ghost from their body and then snap back or teleport back to their sleepers from wherever they are. But those lucky enough to have become X-bonded are able to take those abilities even further. X-bonding happens when two people experience a moment of life-threatening crisis together, or a deep emotional connection of some kind. It's impossible to predict when X-bonding might happen, just as it's impossible to predict when a robot might link to the Nex. No one has really been able to figure it out. When it happens, though, X-bonded people develop an amazing attachment through the Nex. One thing they can do is telepathically communicate with each other. They can do this no matter how far apart they are or what obstacles are between them, and without the need for Draxels, which are covered in another video. One can simply contact the other and they can start talking. Both have to agree to open that dialogue, and they can only exchange words, not images or feelings. But that's only the beginning. Those who are ex-bonded can also instantly send their ex-ghosts to their ex-bonded mate. This is called ghost traveling, and it's kind of like snapping back, except their ex-ghosts teleport directly beside the ex-ghost of the person they're bonded to, as long as there's enough space for them. Ex-bonded pairs always ghost travel to each other's ex-ghosts, not necessarily their physical bodies. So, if one is ghosted, their bonded mate wouldn't be able to travel to their sleeper, only to wherever their ex-ghost is. There also has to be enough room for their ghosts to appear next to them without anything more than a layer of clothing in the way. You can't ghost travel to the opposite side of a wall, for example. Finally, ex-bonded people share a special bond beyond these abilities as well. They can inspire each other, motivate each other, and even give each other strength they didn't know they had. Ex-bonding is rare, and even though lots of people have studied it, no one really understands how it happens or why. But there have been unique instances when more than two people have ex-bonded together. When that happens, that telepathic communication I was talking about earlier isn't just between individuals. It can also be a kind of party line among the entire ex-bonded group. And each member of that team can ghost travel to any other member. It's pretty amazing. Anyway, those are the basics of ex-bonding. I'll talk to you next time, and thanks for listening.